Welcome to Viewpoints, brought to you by Equiture, the leading provider of public safety software and training. My name is Cherie Bartram. I will be your host today. A little bit about us before we get started. We are an international leader of public safety training and software technology of products geared toward providing tools to help responders stay safe and educated. For those of you who are new, we offer a monthly podcast and a variety of guests geared toward public safety topics, as well as monthly webinars and a diverse offering of training courses. Today on our show, we have with us Dr. Andre Jones. Dr. Jones, I realize this introduction may be a little long, but it was so impressive. I wasn't sure where to cut it off. So, for our audience, here we go. Dr. Jones holds a master's degree in emergency management, public administration, and philosophy of industrial and organizational psychology, and is working on a PhD in that field as well, as a PhD in public policy and administration. Dr. Jones is a seasoned expert with 28 years of experience, 20 years plus experience in emergency management, public safety, and emergency medical services. As an adjunct facility member and published researcher, he brings a unique blend of academic rigor and practical expertise to the review and evaluation of doctoral research. His work spans operational leadership, strategic planning, and scholarly contributions, particularly in the field of emergency dispatch, organizational psychology, and public policy. Welcome to our show today, Dr. Jones.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Today on our episode, we're going to explore one of my many favorite topics, and that is how leadership doesn't begin with a promotion. It begins with a mindset, a self-awareness, and a purpose. We're going to highlight how supervisors can recognize and develop leadership behaviors in their teams early on, and how this approach supports culture and psychological safety and long-term retention in emergency communications. So, Dr. Jones, I found your article in the International Academies of Emergency Dispatch, and we call it IAED, from September
Yep.
2022. Very enjoyable, not just because it was my exact thoughts and how I modeled my career, um, of uh, um, promotions, but how you discussed sacrifices. Can you please explore with our audience how leadership doesn't begin with a promotion, but a mindset, a self awareness, and a purpose? A purpose rather than, hey, I want that title.
Of course. And that's not actually how it was always interpreted for me. And it's through experience that that kind of changed over time, I think. Originally it was, okay, I want to be a manager. And the only way that I thought to be able to do that, going on a rampage as a young person, 18, 19 years old, having that opportunity was, just to be the best I could at being a dispatcher, and hopes that as the best dispatcher, that would allow me then to, of course, be the best supervisor, the best leader. But what I didn't realize is that once you become a supervisor, formally, or a leader otherwise, it doesn't, you rescind all that previous knowledge unnecessarily that you had as a dispatcher, because it's not about being the best at that previous job. It's about a new job. It's about developing the culture and the organization, and it's more about the people. There's many times that I felt, as when I became a supervisor, that I lost that connection, that there was a huge disconnect, hence why then I started going on into the formal learning, which is when I really learned that leadership and supervision, there is a huge difference between managing tasks and shaping culture in an organization, which is really what, being a leader is and should be about. And that starts before the title. Like you said, it's about those skills that we're talking about now in the last couple of years: emotional intelligence, your self-awareness, and developing those type of skills, those people skills that allow you to be able to step back, look at situations a little differently, and address them from a people centric, rather than always task and technical oriented, because those things are important. And when you're able to do that, to have that ability to change your mindset, you can look at and focus a little bit better on the fact that, you know what, there's something that I did in fact miss, and I've never really, in my hopes to become a supervisor and a formal leader, missed the opportunity to learn from those who were above me and actually follow. And I think that's a hard lesson as well, is that, you can't follow, um, or if you can't follow, you can't lead. And that was something, a very, tough lesson I learned as well, as a precursor to leadership, is very good followership.
Oh, followership is really important. I do agree with you. A lot of people miss how to be a follower. All right. So followership is very important. So I have a question. When people are, they have their eyes set on supervision and they think they're being good followers. One of the things I've noticed, and I experienced it myself, is we really do think, that we understand, and we get frustrated with leadership. Um, how do you think it would help someone not in leadership, who has their eyes set? You said to have that, to develop that mindset. How do people do that to have a clearer vision of what a leader goes through when you're not in that position?
That's a good question. I think it really comes down to being and having the opportunity to work with people that can be a really good example. It's very difficult, and it may, especially I recall being it very difficult because the management and leaders that I had to look up to weren't in fact that. I had one. He was really good. He was always calm, always cool and collected, and I considered him more of a mentor by example than an actual formal coach, right? And because of that, and being the example that he was, and how he led us, and not in commanding situation or commanding attitude, but the fact that he was very trustworthy, he was very kind, and he was able to get across most of the things that he needed through his power of influence, taught me that this is really what a leader was supposed to be doing. So unless you're able to, go to school and get formal education on the different type of leaders, leadership style, you read various books like emotional intelligence, or managing yourself and stuff like that. I think having a good mentor or coach can be that way, a good way to do it. Whether it's something that you approach a leader and say, hey, you know what, you're the leader of the organization, you're a manager, you're a supervisor, I aspire to be like you one day. And them receive it, if they're really good and open to it, as not a threat to their position, but to really be, a really good example, and then help you, in a developmental way, to allow you to become and move up and learn what it means to be a supervisor, and a leader in the organization. I think that's really the only way. As you do that, I think it gives you that opportunity to then practice those things that maybe as a formal leader you'll end up kind of doing, just like, for example, encouraging peer accountability and partnership, working together with your team members, having that kind of mentality and attitude. It gives you that ability to start practicing up, and I think that's important.
Uh, when you wrote that article for the journal, when you talked about one day you may lead, um, and you talked about, um, I think you quoted someone, when you find your purpose and meaning. Um, so for me, I wanted to be a leader almost early, or way before my capabilities were there. Uh, what do you suggest to people early on who have that drive to lead, but no abilities. They think they have the ability, but it's it's not there. So then they get turned down for leadership positions. Um, Now I had a different path. I didn't give up, but you know, not not everybody is going to keep going. What kind of
This is true.
encouragement?
The kind of encouragement I would say is going back to very foundational things, just sitting back and taking a look at the bigger picture and really understanding what your purpose is. And the purpose for some people may be they want to lead because it comes with a benefit. For example, compensation, or it comes with opportunities to advance further in their career or open a door outside of the career. And I think the challenge is people who are, former leaders already, when they look or they open the doors for opportunities, depending on where the organization is at the time is going to determine whether or not the person they recruit or hire is going to fill that position on the basis of what the organization is trying to do at the time. So I think that sometimes way individuals may get rejected because they don't understand their purpose, let alone that of the organization they work for. So if it's to grow the organization, to develop, to have a new training program, if you're applying for that while your purpose may be to, put food on the table or to allow you to have more money in order to go get a formal education, it has to be able to support whatever the mission is, which in this case, an example would be to formalize or, improve the training department. So these are the things that you need to focus your energy in by intention. Um, and I think for, sustainability's sake is that it's important again to have that alignment. And sometimes we miss that. And I think sometimes organizations who have leaders that are looking to develop people, which is what they should make sure they have your mission, you have your vision, but you're also individually holding people accountable for their own personal mission and vision and making sure they're aligned so that you can grow, essentially kind of together. Um, so when you go into the job interview, you're asking, how can I help? This is what I have going on in my life. This is what you need me to accomplish in this job. And in order for me to be in this job, I want to understand how we're going to be able to grow and move forward together. And I think that's an important part of effective leadership and taking on that responsibility.
You just touched on something. That's a great answer. And you touched on something in that answer that I wonder, I've gone over some of your dissertations and you have a lot of articles. Um, if the leader doesn't feel threatened,
Yeah.
how often have you run into that? Because
So
that's a huge thing.
it is a huge thing. And I think in the times that it did happen to me, I wasn't, at least at that time in my life, I can honestly say it wasn't something that I took well, and I always pushed back. So there is a difference when you're trying to grow as a person and an individual, and you're really in tune with your emotional intelligence, and you're actually looking to be a leader, an aspiring leader. There's a difference between initiative and assertiveness in this aspect. So you have a manager or leader who's above you and they feel threatened, you know that it is. If you're being assertive, everything that you do from now on is going to be about attacking and putting yourself in the position that eventually you take their position. Whereas initiative is, it's going to them and saying, you know what, I appreciate the fact that you may be threatened, but I also understand that in order for you to move up, as they say, they can't, replace you. It's not likely that they're going to be able to hire anyone else. So you put your position in where you're helping them. You're taking on projects. You're showing an initiative to show that you're not there to threaten their job, but actually support them. Because let's face it, most leaders that are in this threatening realm, at least the ones that I've worked with, they are overwhelmed with work and responsibilities. And I actually think what the threat is that it's misplaced and misunderstood. And when you come in with them and say, "How can I help?" I can say myself as being, a former leader many times, I wish someone had come and asked me that, because you do feel overwhelmed, and it wasn't that you were threatened at all. It's like it's this sense of being unapproachable, but you wish somebody actually would. So it was very misunderstood in a lot of these instances.
And you're talking about the incidences where the person over you was threatened by your presence.
Yes, yes.
So you've been a formal leader many times. Have you ever had that, have you ever had have you ever had people come to you and say, I want to be you someday?
Yes, I have, and I encourage that. I mean, because I say that when I, for example, am putting different, initiatives and stuff in place. I want people to adopt them so that if I do leave, they can continue. Not as a legacy, not to say, oh, this is something Andre created, but something that's sustainable that allows, if it is in fact a good initiative or a good program or a good project, that it continues on and it shows that it was actually good and well. And you need people once you start those programs, initiatives, to be able to continue that on. So I think that's an important as a leader. If someone comes to you and says, hey, I want to be you one day, you say, great, where can we start? You assess and look at, their current skills. You may formally or informally do like a gap analysis to say, okay, these are the kinds of things that I'm supposed to be doing or the things I like or tried to do. Let's see where you're at and let's see how we can fill in some of the gaps to get you to where I am, and see what recommendations I can have, whether it be formal training, shadowing, those kind of things, that allows them to be and grow and develop. I think you're not doing your job as a supervisor or a manager or a department head if you're not, part of your program is employee development, meaning developing the next generation of people that are eventually going to be running the organization, because you're not going to be there forever.
Right. Succession planning is super important.
Yes.
I remember having a, dispatcher come and say, I want to sit in your chair someday. And I worked with her, and then one day she said, I don't want your job. And I thought, oh, well, I did too good of a job telling her what I did. She didn't want my job.
I think
Well,
there is a misconception, and I think that if you have the opportunity to have people to come and see what you do, I think that there is that confusion that they believe that. As another example, so when I was a line person or line staff, I thought in order to change the world, it required me to have a title and be a manager or director or something like that, because I wanted to be in charge. And like Simon says, leadership is not about being in charge, it's about taking care of those who are in your charge. And once you understand that and you can appreciate that, it completely changes your perspective and your relationship with your staff. And it makes it more pleasant. It's not only good for the overall culture of the organization, but your own well-being, because you're not as stressed out, because now it's about us, and not about me.
and you've said it's not about sacrifices,
Yes.
right? It's not about giving anything up. Um, Yeah, and I liked that, being a leader, you're a servant. Uh, we had
Yes.
a chief who really stressed that, and then his successor stressed it as well. And actually, he had us serving our staff once a month. We would serve them barbecue.
Oh, that's excellent.
Yeah, it was really good. But um, as leaders, so if you're trying to show people what it means to be a leader, and you say, as a leader, you're you have to hold yourself to a higher standard, and they're like, no. um how do you how do you get that through? I mean, you might model it, but how do you help them to understand that, um as a leader, you're being watched? So you have
Yeah.
to model that, that high good behavior, that, um, dare I say it, that moral compass.
It is a challenge, and sometimes I think the helplessness of some supervisors and leaders is because they may not know what to do, so it's easier for them to just go in the office and hide or just attend meetings all day. But then they become, kind of, disconnected. And to your point, I think that it's really incumbent for us to realize that we do set the tone, right? We're we are as the weather. I remember my manager telling me one day he could always tell who was on duty in the control room by the tone of the radio traffic. When he so and so was on duty, it was, everyone was pleasant and jovial and often laughing and borderline unprofessional. And then there was times when someone else was on duty, it was like very, brief, precise, it was like a well-oiled machine, no laughing, no anything kind of going on. And I think there's a balance there. You don't necessarily want things to be chaotic and stressful, but it's a direct reflection of the people that are in charge, who has set the tone. A lot of which is very unspoken. So when you come to work, it's like, okay, what forecast am I bringing to the room today? Kind of thing, and it's hard. We have to fake smile. I don't like it. I don't like to do it. But if you don't, you create monsters. In the culture, and because they will take that and run with it. If you come in with a little cloudy day, the next thing you know, everyone else is thunderstorms, hail, tornadoes, and everything else, and you may not have even known you'd done it. And that's the bad part about it. We don't really realize it.
Right. So if you're a leader and that's what you're modeling to people who want to be leaders, that's kind of hard to convince them that leadership is a good thing, right?
It
Um,
is.
s- um, so cultivating leaders, would be leaders, um, it really, so it's one of those things, right, that starts in the middle.
Yes.
Um, because the supervisors, uh, in a dispatch center especially, they have the direct contact with the dispatchers on the floor. You just described a scenario where a supervisor comes in, maybe they have a whole bunch of internal stress. It's hard to walk in with a smile.
It
I
is.
can think of half a dozen examples right off the top of my head, and it sets the whole tone, and then that supervisor sits back and says, "Wow, why doesn't my shift like me?"
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
And then
Exactly.
there's no supervisor wannabes that come out of that shift.
Mm. No, no, they do not.
So, you talk about emotional intelligence, increasing awareness of that. Do you recommend that by example, or do you recommend that um, through additional education, or both, or how do you get that shift, or do people either
So
have
it
it
really
or not?
Yeah, I was gonna say that. I said I think just like many skills, some people have it already and some people don't, or they get it over time. I think some emotional intelligence, I'm not a psychologist, I just study a little bit, but I maybe get a lot of the self-awareness out of being exposed to trauma. And they become people who perhaps internalize a lot and always are taken back and really look at things from a different lens, a different view before they speak, things like that. So once they're able to do that, that kind of translates eventually into your formal, if you will, like emotional intelligence type stuff. But there's been so much need to have it in a skills based, training, education, books, conferences, sessions, to really highlight now just how much more important it is, and research is showing that, which is why in a profession like ours that's very technical and often can impact and influence your well-being, the fact that you have such high degrees of emotional intelligence can improve your ability to be resilient in a lot of the circumstances that you're faced with on the call, and not just on the calls but off the call. We're talking now these different types of traumas that occur as a result of forced overtime, or supervisors that can't, enforce policy correctly across all shifts. This causes trauma, and it causes issue as with your psychological safety. And if you're not a person that has good emotional intelligence skills, everything is personal. There's always a battle. You have no ability to disconnect. And in my case, develop what I call an 80-20 rule and save something for yourself so that you're not always, fighting, with everybody, in your environment. Um, and I think that it does require, if you can't get it this way, you know, you talked earlier about, having someone that can mentor you to you, maybe another person that you think, maybe not a former leader, an informal person, like a leadership buddy. I have one that I in my organization that we, vet, and we talk about little things that are going on, things that we can vent without fear, and not holding necessarily each of us too much accountable, but just enough that we don't feel lonely and isolated in the decisions that we may be making or about to make, just to sense check things. And I think emotional intelligence plays a part of that.
I'm really glad you brought that up. Well, about having a buddy. How do you pick that person? Because I used to caution employees about that all the time. Be careful who you talk to, because I
Yeah.
would see people buddy up to the wrong person, and I
Mm,
would watch their career tank,
yeah.
because they
Yeah.
went from a decent dispatcher with a good attitude to just because they trusted, I would die for this person. Oh, behind your back, this person's
Yeah.
just destroying you. How
Right.
how do you how do you pick, and then how do you
It
help?
it does take time to get, this have a really good relationship with someone that you can trust. And you said that's a big thing. Before you even start having those conversations with people. And normally I would suggest probably not necessarily having one that's on the floor with you. Maybe not even on the same shift, or if you can, not even the same department, someone outside the department, that can give you again a different perspective. So when you vent or about something, they can say, okay, but have you thought about? So again, it's not about creating a sense of accountability where every time you say something, they're going to be like, you don't know what you're talking about. But someone that can actually go toe to toe with you and sense check where your self awareness doesn't allow you to be able to do that, But yeah, when I first started, trying to have these conversations with certain people, then it was like I was part of the mod squad. It wasn't really very conducive to me moving up or being a very good leader because they were in not the right frame of mind. So you need to find someone that definitely challenges your perspective, not necessarily always agrees with it, but are also in a level probably above, because that's what you're aspiring to be, right? You're aspiring to be a leader. So you need to be talking to leaders that can mentor and be a leadership buddy for you.
And it would be hard to have your supervisor be that
Yeah,
person that you would vent to, but so so if they have leadership as a goal, um, I mean, things happen. I definitely agree with you that someone to vent to would be a good idea. They should probably look for someone who's not going to jump on that bandwagon with them,
correct. Yes.
right?
They're not going to hold court with you. Yes, correct.
Right. So for our listeners, look for somebody who's going to check you,
Yes,
check
yes,
your attitude, reposition your thought process,
exactly.
and watch how they do that, because someday that's going to be you
Yes,
helping somebody else.
yes.
These are great tips, and I know succession planning and leading. My own biggest flaw has been a couple of the agencies that I was a leader in. Is I kind of left. It was, I don't want to say it was a surprise, but it was sooner than I thought I was going to leave. It was like
Mhm,
opportunities came up, and I was like, oh, and then I hadn't planned on leaving when I left. I didn't have anybody lined up, and that's
mhm.
hard.
Yeah,
So when I left my last agency, I was more prepared. I had a really great person ready to step up and take the place, and he's going really strong in the organization. I'm super proud of him.
Excellent.
What kind of tips can you give our audience that we might, not have gone over?
No, I would start by saying from your example that that's actually a really good thing to do. I think as leaders, you should definitely mentor and develop to the next people that would eventually be, taking your position, identifying the talent within your organization. It not only helps you because, then you're not, have all this, responsibility and you're not always overwhelmed, but it also sets the tone and example for others who are watching that, hey, we work somewhere where the person in charge is not threatened by us and actually wants help and they want ideas and they want initiative, and they're demonstrating that. And I think that that's, probably the last nugget thing I would say is that when you're in these informal positions, not necessarily one of power, that being able to demonstrate initiative, compassion, and consistency is really, really important. And I think that that's what it's all about. You're being watched, you're being the examples, and sometimes the most powerful of leaders. D- Doing simple things like just defending your team members in a room, giving credit, absorbing blame. Those little things are just showing that you have leadership qualities. You may not be formally trained, those things normally come in time. And I think that some managers, when they're trying to identify the next leaders or supervisors, if you will, they're not necessarily looking always, probably, for the best dispatcher. They're looking for people who exude those leadership qualities so that when they do promote them, if there's a policy or a procedure or something that needs to be implemented or otherwise managed on the floor, they know that you can do that because you have the emotional intelligence, you have the skills and abilities to be able to effectively communicate amongst the staff, the intentions of the formal leaderships, and lead laterally in order to make sure that the mission and vision are being accomplished. And I think that's the most important thing. But the challenge is having those conversations with your team members to really understand. I don't think we do that. That's one of the things I want to start working on with other levels of the team, is just making sure we all understand our roles and responsibilities and mentoring, laterally to give opportunity for those who are is trying to show initiative, that compassion and consistency that I've discussed.
I like that. And I know those were your last tidbits, but I do want to point out two things that you said that I think sometimes well, I've watched it happen, absorbing blame and giving credit. Um, I think that's a failure for
Yes,
some leaders when you have people coming up behind you who want to be leaders and they watch their leaders throw them under the bus and take all the
yes,
credit. Uh,
yes,
that's a big detriment
it is.
to them wanting to be leaders, at least in that organization.
And the learning experiences I get when that's actually occurred, and it takes again a lot of emotional intelligence, that self-awareness, that ability to step back and say, it's not personal. I don't know what's going on in their life where they felt that they needed to do that or to say that. And you can do it one of two ways, by maybe on the aside going and talking to them, or just simply letting them go and saying, you know what, if I'm ever in this position, I will never do that, and learn from that experience.
Right. I know I have said on more than one occasion I've had some really terrible bosses and I've learned a lot of great things from them because you can learn from both.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Well, Dr. Jones, I'm so pleased that you were able to join us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for taking the time out of your day or your night, as it may be, to
Yes.
join us. For our audience, if you have any comments, please feel free to email me, Bartram, so C Bartram at Equiture, EQUATURE.com. And if you would like to be a guest on our show, uh, Again, you can email me. Otherwise, thank you again for joining us, and we hope you have a great day.
Thank you.